I've already made several videos about arcade cabinets that you can have inside your house, but what if you are looking for something a little bit smaller, a little bit cheaper, and maybe a little more themed? And that's exactly what Arcade1Up is looking to fulfill with their line of vintage arcade cabinets. They look just like miniature versions of the arcades you remember, while also bringing in niceties such as online play, infinite quarters, and easier game modes. But does that make them worth the investment? While most of Arcade1Up's cabinets are themed around one game, they actually normally contain multiple games. In my example here, X-Men actually includes Captain America and the Avengers, and Avengers in Galactic Storm, which I had never heard of, and yeah. But both the X-Men game and the Avengers game are pretty fun to play. Being themed around one game, though, does have its drawbacks. The buttons all have the combinations and instructions for X-Men, which won't be useful if you're going to be playing the Avengers games or the Captain America game. This on-screen UI does show the controller scheme for each game as you power it up, so you can figure it out by yourself, but don't expect to hit mutant power and get the same result in every game. Talking about the user interface, and it's actually pretty nice and straightforward. Each game has its own individual settings, which lets you change things like difficulty, number of lives, abilities, as well as enabling scan lines if you really want a more CRT look. Actually playing the games is pretty true to life for what you would get in the arcades. Controls are okay, and if you've only played it in the arcade, you'll love being able to use as many quarters as you want. And the addition of the easier modes will enable more players, such as kids or people who don't play video games very often, to have an easier time jumping in. The system also comes with Wi-Fi, which lets you get updates, but also lets you play games online. This is an optional feature, but if you are looking to play with more people than just yourself or people who can fit in a small room, it is a welcome addition. Probably the biggest downside, though, is the lack of games. Yes, this comes with 3 games, but for several $100s, you could get hundreds of games, especially if you get them in bundles like Arcade Classics or something like that. And while the cabinet at least comes with 3 games to play, only the first 2 are actually any good, and the Avengers in Galactic Storm is not worth your time. Though at least you can turn the difficulty down all the way and at least make it a little more tolerable to beat. So the Arcade1Up machines are nice, affordable, though somewhat limited arcade cabinets. So should you get one? One nice thing about these cabinets is how many they've sold, and because they have sold so many, it means there is a pretty vibrant modding scene which lets you add more games over time. And while the modifications to do that is pretty expensive, it would still end up being a bit cheaper than buying a full-size arcade cabinet with all those different games inside. So if you are space limited and you want to get this as a modding machine in the future, it does make a pretty good option. Or if you really just want to have an arcade as a centerpiece and you're okay with only 1 or 2 games being on it, then it is pretty good. But if you are looking for the best bang for the buck arcade cabinet you can get, this probably isn't it.
Nothing against the power of the evil mutant. The only hope is X-Men.